It's so precarious, really. Could so easily have not happened. We just happened to be in exactly the right place in the world, in exactly the right frame of mind.
I mean, I just literally got off the plane, really hungover from the end of tour party, and just started writing and filming. And I was obviously trying to avoid being in Blur.
The idea of it being an album was a kind of a joke, really. It's ludicrous to think you might be able to do an album in 5 days.
Giving someone a second, third chance and then them seemingly just blowing it again with you, you know. And you're like, oh God, don't think I can cope with this anymore.
Yeah, well, you know, relationships are scary and people do weird things. You know, and just when you think everything is, you know, nice and smooth, it's sort of a bit like, whoa, you know, what's going on here? Well, you're always going to have times when you haven't done the right thing. It's part of growing up and learning what the right thing to do is.
Well, we're going to sing some songs about your town. Thank you.
2009 was a sort of reconciliation and it was done. I don't think any of us wanted it to be diminishing returns and nostalgia. That would have been horrible.
In many ways, I'd sort of accepted that I wasn't really going to do anything again with Blur. Then the Olympics came up.
It was because of the Olympics we got a call to do a big show on the last day in Hyde Park. The atmosphere was right. It just felt like a very special occasion, and I think it was just such a good one. We were all like, actually, that was quite good.
It's like, well, if we're getting together to do that, we might as well go and play some places we've never played before. And I think that was the reason why we found ourselves in Hong Kong.
We're in a happy position in our lives where nobody feels they have to be in Blur. You know, we've been going for God knows how many years now. We're in a happy position where we can do whatever seems most interesting at the time.
You know, I can remember you when you were just starting out.
Yeah.
Is it more enjoyable now, do you reckon?
But it always feels special making music. I mean, that's the reality of it. Making music with the four of us, whether it's in the studio or on stage, feels special. And we still get to do, you know, mix of big shows and small shows, and that's kind of the main thing that keeps it interesting.
Because you got all the memories from the first, didn't you?
Well, some of them.
Some of them, yeah. Not the best ones.
We got to Hong Kong, smashed it there, and then we were supposed to fly on to Taipei. Damon will say somewhere else, but it wasn't. It was Taipei, Damon.
We were actually on our way to Tokyo, but the gig was cancelled.
The promoter got shot or something, I don't know. It was all a bit like, it's not happening anymore. Okay.
We had 5 days in Hong Kong. The opportunity arose to make some music.
It was just like, we're in Hong Kong, there's nothing else to do, let's just go to the studio.
You know, I quite willingly would sit and relax for a few days, and jamming in studios can be a fairly unpleasant, claustrophobic, sweaty, smelly experience compared to like a hotel swimming pool. So.
We could have spent the week off on the top of an open-top bus, taking in the sights. But, you know, when musicians are bored, they tend to whip their instruments out. That's kind of how things go, really.
We could have easily just had a holiday, you know, but I suppose it partly sort of work ethic and partly a sort of curiosity on my behalf of, is there anything here that's more than just a sort of us playing this, you know, this Blur thing out until we can play it no longer.
It was just like it was at the very first rehearsal. It was just really good fun, kicking the can around. There was nothing sort of too precious. We'd try something. If it wasn't working, just try something else. And there was loads of starting points, which is what you need. And then other stuff just spontaneously came into being.
Better not actually, because you know what that is.
Yeah.
Well, it's millions of things.
Yes.
But it's, I'm free to do whatever I like. Crucify me, innit?
Nothing changes. You're approaching it with that mentality of, well, let's try and do something different. It certainly seemed like quite an exciting thing to do, making music in Hong Kong.
And in a way, there was no pressure, so it had that sense of we were a gang again doing something slightly sort of naughty, recording. No one knew we were doing it. It was a very nondescript building. It was called the Acme Building. It had no windows. It's really small. I mean, really, really cramped.
I think if we'd been booked into a massive posh studio with Pharrell Williams to make like a comeback record, everybody would have run a mile. But just because we were all getting on really well, enjoying playing together, it was just like, well, let's just go to the studio and just make some music just for the hell of it, because that's what we like doing and that's what we're good at.
But I didn't want this album to escape. I thought that would be sad, because it did feel so good recording those sessions.
Oh, we've got some in here.
We were all stuck in Hong Kong, disconnected from the complicated lives that we've built up for ourselves. I think that was really important. There was no distractions. We're all missing our families, and I think that came out in the playing as well.
What do you got? Mass produced in somewhere hot. You'll have to go on the underground to get things done here. And bang round. If you need a yellow duck, service done. This is the place to come to. Well, it was another hot spot. Crossing on the guillotine. And if you have nobody left to rely on, I'll hold you in my arms and let you drift. It's got to be that time again. And June will be over soon again. So get yourself up, get adrift on your way. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Taking off again. The 514 two-week screen state. You've sent me out to stay. Causing on our greatest night. And talking times will let us down again. Talk on your ass all night. You wanna be there. Step inside the time and right. To let that point forgot. Oh, just don't go there. Racks inside the time and right. To let that point forgot.
Sod the record labels and all those people. That sort of pressure is something you can kind of rebel against. But you can't really rebel against how you're seen musically, hour after hour, day after day with your mates. Because they know when you're being crap. You know when you're being crap. You're pretty vulnerable. You're in a very vulnerable place, even if you're jamming and having a laugh. I suppose we push ourselves to go somewhere. You've got to go somewhere. It's got to feel like you've travelled almost when you've had some sort of a jam sesh.
The wonderful thing was there was no distraction. It was a very sort of grounding process, really, because we all got on the tube again together, basically, and went to work and then left together.
I think every day we went back on the tube and were like, yeah, that was good, it was good. But none of us were like really wanting to admit it, perhaps. We were still, I felt okay, but let's not get overexcited about it.
It's going to be great, though.
It's the way that they used to make records, like in the 50s, before studios became these big, massive, unwieldy bits of technology. You get a bunch of cats in a studio who can really play and just go for it.
We kind of approached it like we did in the early days. Just in that 5 days, we just churned out as many ideas as we possibly could. It's important to have the freedom to let your mind run free.
Dave started off in the studio but felt he was too distant from the rest of us, so came into a control room where we were all playing. But didn't bring a full kit and it wasn't mic'd properly. Everything was just about putting ideas down. But this was the most spontaneous kind of session that we'd had since really, you know, Modern Life is Rubbish, Part Life.
At the end of the 5 days, we had something like 20-odd songs, and it felt like the best stuff we'd ever done. It was a complete splurge and a release, and I just felt completely jubilant.
All the melodies essentially were in place. There were sort of little glimpses of ideas and stuff. You know, and lyrics are always quite a struggle for me. I can't just sit down and write all day. So I hadn't written lyrics.
Well, yeah, we finished, and then, Steve Sedgwick came out, engineer from 13, and I guess he put it in his bag and went home, and that was it, really.
I don't know whether it went into a box or a USB or I don't know what it went into, but it went into something and was filed away somewhere. In my mind, it was an experiment that failed because we hadn't finished it.
After the 5 days in Hong Kong, the tour started up again. Things got shelved for a long time, it has to be said.
Thanks, Vicky.
See you.
Cheers, thanks, all.
See you in Jakarta.
I'll pick you up tomorrow at 1:30 at the hotel.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Right, well, we should be all right then.
I lead a very sort of static, quiet life here. Then suddenly the phone will ring and it's like, oh, you're doing Hyde Park and it's sold out, or, Graham's made you a new record, and then it's like getting dragged off by an ex-girlfriend and all mussed up, and then spat back into my life again when it's all over, just going, what was that?
We were a bubble, a four-person bubble, taking ourselves somewhere with these sessions. And I suppose we'd forgot that when we go home, we all go into all these different professional, domestic situations and geographical situations.
Damon made a good analogy. It's like if you leave the washing up for a day, you start like dreading it, and if you leave it for a few days, you don't want to go back in the kitchen at all, do you? 6 months went by, nothing had happened, and then another 6 months went by and nothing had happened, and then another 6 months went by and nothing had happened. And then I remembered that I had a camera with me in the studio, and I thought, oh, I'll watch those films. And even though it was a rubbish microphone on the camera, you could hear it, you could feel it. I'd wake up with, like, New World Tower in my head. That one really haunted me for some reason.
Would you like the fall to the floor better? There was something quite good about that fall to the floor thing.
was horrible knowing that we'd done something that was really good that didn't look like it was going to see the light of day. And I poured myself a huge glass of wine and just watched them all and just thought, poured myself another big glass of wine, watched them all again and just thought, what a shame.
Blur is a great privilege to be able to tap into, and I try and enjoy it 100% when I'm in it, and then as soon as it's finished, I walk away from it completely. I don't expect anything, you know? So anything that happens is just really lovely and positive. You know, we can play with just a couple of instruments in a little room or in front of 80,000 people. It's not us playing, I don't think, changes at all. It's just what happens around us that sort of cause and effect, isn't it? When I'm playing a big gig, it's about having the confidence to know almost innately that it's not all about the first 5 minutes being explosive. There is a kind of seduction. It's such a treat to play so close to home in many ways. It's not easy, Hyde Park. It's a big space, and I love it. It's just Hyde Park. It just feels very quintessential. But it's not easy. Certainly I don't go on stage, and now I've done it, like, this is the 4th time, and go, hey, I can do this, isn't it? There's a definite sort of terror.
And it's got a good resonance for Blur. The Olympics show was just bonkers, because London was just ready for it. So hopefully tonight will be special as well.
It's really hard to define what makes a really magical gig. In Blur, it's about this commune with the audience.
It is a bit overwhelming when you walk on a stage in front of 65,000 people.
It's an extraordinary thing that sort of takes over not only us, but the audience, and there's a sense of complete release and commune.
She says there's ants in the carpet, dirty little monsters, picking all the morsels, picking up the rubbish. Give her effervescence, she needs a little sparkle. Good morning TV, you're looking so healthy. We all say don't want to be alone. We wear the same clothes 'cause we feel the same. We kiss with dry lips when we say goodnight. Another century, oh, it's nothing special.
it's this kind of a mishmash of all different people with different temperaments, attitudes, lives, troubles, problems, and they're all coexisting in this same weird thing.
I think that's the thing. We all just enjoy it now. It's there's no sense of duty or pressure. It's just like, great, let's do a big rock show. was thinking about cheese and children. It was good that Graham called me and said, you know those songs we started in Hong Kong? I was like, yeah. He said, I think I might just see what I can do with them.
There's a kind of a weirdly formed way of doing things, not like a hierarchy, but a way of doing things, which quite often would be that Damon says, oi, how about doing this? And you don't know whether Damon actually likes that responsibility or... So I sort of tested it and sort of took the initiative myself and told him that I'd like to take it all and look at it all. It wasn't an easy conversation to prepare for, weirdly, but I mean, I shouldn't have been really worried about it. You know, I've known him longer than anyone else. I think these are quite rough. Sort of like, Damon's mum gave me that when I was in hospital with anemia, and I was 18. I've lost the handle, which is a great shame. But the cup remains with some beads. This is the remnants of my necklace that Damon made me in there. They still had no reason to trust that I just wouldn't concrete it over with loads of guitars or make a total mess.
Sending Graham to the studio with the masters is a bit like me sending my 11-year-old to the supermarket to get the shopping. You've put the whole thing through a distortion pedal. You've put the mix through a flanger. OK.
I was excited. It's great to not have to do everything. You know, there's been a lot of occasions where I felt like, God, why am I doing everything here? So for me, it was really a lovely surprise that he was prepared to do that and was up for it and was able to do it. So I just felt really pleased that my oldest friend was sort of feeling that kind of positive and confident in himself again. It was fantastic.
I didn't know whether it was going to work, but didn't have much to lose, and so that's how I put it to him, really, that people are confused, we're all confused about what happened with Think Tank and all the rest of it. And it's a long time ago, so just let's not make sense of it, move on and make something great, you know. And I was like, yeah, go on then.
Are we ready? Behind me, and I'm feeling the love of you. So you better get to charge until see you again, and then you know just what to do. If you call up on the girls or look up on the sea, I wanna be with you. One lies and one night,
You know, friendships that are long-term friendships, put through the mangle, you're always going to have times when you haven't done the right thing. It's part of growing up and learning what the right thing to do is. I've done the wrong thing and sort of admitted to it. It wasn't my fault, it's just that I didn't really, I found it difficult to cope. I was a mardy-ass brat, you know, throughout the 90s. You know, when I was 21, 22, I was a 10-year-old. I had no clue. I was away. I'd just moved out of home when I was 19. 2 years later, on my 21st birthday, I was playing at the Marquee, and then we were signed, and then we were touring America. It's a weird thing to take on board. It is weird, and you don't know your own capacity to party when you're that age, and you're just allowed to. It's like Rumpelstiltskin. You go into another room with a bigger pile of booze, and it's like, drink! And you do that, and you turn into a maniac. And then the next day, you're at another show, in another room with a bigger pile of booze, drink! And you're bound to flipping get slightly frayed. So I thought maybe, you know, if I have a look at this stuff and something comes of it, it would be a sort of redress the balance of past shame.
I think his sort of masterstroke really was getting Stephen Street to sort of help him, because Stephen is incredibly meticulous and patient and really also knows the dynamic of Blur better than probably anyone, having made most of our records.
It's always great to hear from the guys, and I feel very close to them. But this was a bolt out of the blue. I hadn't spoken to any of them for quite a while. Graham kind of took the phone and said, Stephen, I've got an idea. I want to try and do something with these recordings that we've done in Hong Kong that are kind of sitting in the can.
When you go in with Stephen, you're not going to go in one day and he's a nutter. Or you're not going to go in one day and he's crying on his desk. You're going to go in and he's going to be neatly turned out, and you're going to have a cup of coffee, and he's going to be Stephen Street. But it's so easy to sort of give things a go, you know?
Okay, this is...
With the technology, you know, and if it doesn't work, you just chuck it out again. I just thought it was a lovely, that sounds great, that does. I mean, after 2 days, we knew that it was going to be really worth going after this record. You know, I mean, we worked hard. We worked constantly on it. It was very intense, but a lot of fun. Well, I'd go home and just sit with a guitar going around the chord sequences a bit, but basically I'd just go home in a really good mood, you know. I love the longer contemplative stuff, and I love that it's unfamiliar as a Blur album sonically at times. My whole idea, my whole outlook on the thing was to be very, very sensitive and keep as much of what was from Hong Kong as possible. I mean, we got it reasonably presentable, but I was always like aware that I'm going to have to play it Damon, and it has to be, you know, a welcoming thing, that it was going to have to invite him in. Well, we were sitting right next to him as well, and like, listen to this, you know. It couldn't have been, I mean, I just didn't think that it might be really awkward or nerve-wracking, you know, and you listen to Lonesome Street and you're like, and then Go Out definitely got him. Suddenly went, oh, flipping out, and sort of, was like, yeah, fucking brilliant, yeah, and started jumping about and swearing, and there's, you know, Damon's either like thinking like that, or he suddenly will realise that, yeah, he's into this, and then he'll, you know, he's very demonstrative. It was a relief. It was a relief, but it did sound so bloody good, though. We could probably make a whole different album out of all the same stuff.
This is the first thing I heard when I put up the track, I thought it was a spaceman. I mean, it was like, yeah, well, kind of there, isn't it? But it's kind of, it's...
I had maybe sang a melody over a chorus where I didn't know whether there was a melody there or not, or I'd slotted in a mid-lay, or I'd changed the chord sequence like in the Go Out chorus at the end to pick it up. There was lots of these sort of creative decisions and bits of writing that I didn't know how Damon would react. He's going to be honest. He's going to say what he thinks.
He's always been good. I think, you know, he was definitely a much better musician than me back in the day. I think we're sort of, you know, we're equals now, but I was playing catch up for many years to sort of get to his level, I think.
Graham and Stephen came in and we just sat down and played the whole thing, you know. Some of it I'd completely forgotten about. By the end of it, I was like, oh, wow, that's really great. And then it was like, oh, that means I've got to, oh, God.
It sort of stretched off into the future and I was back in Blur again.
I just want to say, I really, you know, thanks for Graham for getting the magic whip in the shape.
I think my strongest emotion was when they came back with the record. I felt like we were a completely functioning unit again. It was just really, really articulated beautifully and really had a really strong Graham essence over it, you know, which was fantastic. I was really, really proud of what he did.
For me, one of the interesting things lyrically about working on this record was that, what do I sing about?
All the sort of lyrical snippets that were on the record that have been given back to me, so to speak, by Graham, were all from experiences while working in Hong Kong. I became completely immersed, retracing my steps, just thinking about everything, about anything emotion I'd ever had about Hong Kong.
I remember flashbacks lighting up a magic whip. 8 o'clock, Kowloon, emptiness.
Myself in Hong Kong, it started to take on dystopian levels of personal isolation and angst and fear. You know, the way that the insanely claustrophobic city can induce a sort of a spacey, dreamlike state in you.
Swinging on a cable up to Colin. Climbing at the ghostly wine and a battery. That light in your eyes, search for religiously.
Although it's an incredibly frenetic place, because it's sort of going so fast that it sort of slows down and becomes really interesting. There's a lot of these escalators, so you don't have to walk up any of the steep hills anymore. So you can almost sort of be completely static, and so you're in a dream.
Till I ever hold you out there again, will you be mine? 'Cause I'm on a ghost ship drowning my heart in Hong Kong. It's the last.
There is always this possibility of escape. You just have to get on the Star Ferry and you can go to these most divine islands, and there's hundreds of them.
Feeling out of body here, what can I do? 'Cause it's up to the top every day.
All the songs I sort of really like have that geographic thing. I suppose it goes back to songs like Waterloo Sunset or, you know, the Beatles. I think anything, I like those sort of meditations on quite prosaic things, you know.
Till I ever hold you out there again, will you be mine? 'Cause I'm on a ghost ship drowning my heart in Hong Kong.
A story that had a massive effect on me when I was younger was Patrick Hamilton's Hangover Square. It's that juxtaposition of a hangover and a square. I will always be enthralled by those sort of ideas.
There's strong links with Britain and British culture, but at the same time, it's plugged into something completely incomprehensible. It's really exciting, it's really modern, it's beautiful, frenetic, mental, amazing food. I mean, thank goodness we didn't get stuck in Dusseldorf. Keeping something secret is really tricky in the 21st century, and as the delivery date loomed and the circle of trust had to get bigger, it was quite hairy, and it was mastered the day before we did the press conference in Chinatown.
Streaming live online around the world right now, and we're also in a room with members of the assembled.
We say warm welcome, and here we are again to Blur.
Who'd have thunk it?
Who'd have thunk it?
Tuning in, announced this afternoon there will be a new Blur album this year.
Awesome new album called The Magic Whip.
During a press conference in London earlier today, the UK band revealed they will be returning from a long hiatus with a new album, The Magic Whip.
What's going on?
We all met to announce to the world that we'd made a new record.
16 years since their last album as a four-piece in spirit, 12 years since their last album in name as a three-piece. And today they join us with news.
I remember looking over it like 5 minutes into the press conference and seeing Graham fidgeting and Damon boasting and Dave sucking his thumb, just thinking, I remember this.
It's his fault, this whole thing is his fault.
Graham Coxon, ladies and gentlemen.
I thought I played my last cup final. I don't know about you, Graham. Did you think it was all over?
No, I didn't. I think there needed to be something, some punctuation. That's why there was a sort of a determination to get this record together.
You know, after what's been a gradual sort of process of Graham to sort of feeling comfortable returning back into being Graham from Blur, saying, I want to go and take this away and make something of it, you know, great, because that's how we started the band together. So in that sense, it really kind of sort of tightened the whole reason to be in a band again, and then be able to sort of take the narrative and you know, in a sense, the metaphor back to where it was created, which is going to be fascinating.
Now here we are back in Hong Kong in such a short amount of time, playing these songs that were born there. It's pretty weird.
You know, obviously there's a really long story about how we ended up making the Magic Whip, but all of it is true, and it was inspired by this town. So this is a song about Happy Valley. Thought I was a spaceman, digging out my heart in some distant sand dune, in a car park. The desert had encroached upon the places where we live, and people like me fighting the demons in. But we never succeeded. We never succeeded. In fact, we fell. Thought I was a spaceman, digging out my heart in some distant sand dunes, in a car park, by the empty harbor, where jumbo phantoms flow. The fight for Happy Valley, sadly, the lines grow. Thought I found my black box, washed up on the shore, on outlying islands, past the landfall. Thought I'd found it, but that was not true at all. I'd walked into a bar and I raised hell. Cut the chasm out me, always and always the same. Put the ghost in
the audience, they're in control of the whole thing. You know, you establish this relationship with the first few rows. I sort of like to go in there and have a look in people's eyes, touch people's hands, just to get that sense of warmth, literally, from the audience. Are we the food, or are we the participant in eating the food, or is it the opposite? Are we eating the audience, or is the audience eating us?
I got no style. Just take my time. Always losing on this again. But those away. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Got dream try like the Flash Boys have. And now I can't go back. Let it flow. Let it flow. I sleep alone. I sleep
Very intense when you're there and there's like a few thousand people just all piling in, and there's that perspective, but you know, hopefully you've got that spirit in you and that can be expressed. What's beautiful about it is that strange sort of alchemy between the audience and the band and what happens in that moment. You know, it can't be contrived, don't contrive it.
It's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Got train trap like the Flash Boys have. And now I can't go back. Let it flow. Let it flow. I sleep alone. I sleep alone. I sleep alone. I sleep alone.
I think if we hadn't made a record now, that was our chance, Hong Kong. I don't think we'd have got another one. And if we didn't have another record, I don't think anybody... It would have been a bit tawdry to just be on some nostalgia trip.
Hey?
You know, the thing about this record is, although I've used Hong Kong as a metaphor, there's an awful lot about our relationship, especially my relationship with Graham, on it, because it just felt like that's what this record is. You know, if it has an emotional truth, it's somewhere in that reconciliation between us two.
And the bright rays we got in summertime felt like a breath of fresh air back in the summertime when we were more like brothers, but that was years ago. So if it doesn't seem like a protocol, running out of heart today, running out of open road to you, and I know you are remote in any days. Is something broken?
My Terracotta Heart very much is about my relationship with Graham. I mean, he had a little bit of a wobble at the end of the 5-day recording session, and I thought, here we go.
And when we fly tomorrow over the Java seas, and my younger maps will be there with me, 'cause they remind me of swimming out too far one day. Then the coral was gone, but I didn't care anyway. I was running out of hope that day, running out of open road to you, and I know I was emoting, I was
But sometimes knowing each other for so long and being through such a lot with each other is kind of embarrassing, because you remember times and it's like, you know, I've been sort of that way with these people. I've been like insane. I've been, you know, we've seen each other, all of us see each other in such crazy situations, circumstances and emotional states and all the rest of it. Sometimes it's like, God, can't we just, it's all that luggage, we have tons of it, you know?
sweating all the toxins. Is my terracotta heart breaking? I don't know if I'm losing you again, if I'm losing you again.
It's always there, and I guess that's, you know, we can't ever get rid of that, but maybe that helps. I don't know whether that helps us play better together. Everything happens within the 2 hours, you know. We'll love each other again. We'll think, God, you're flipping brilliant, drummer. Or, you know, things like that. That was brilliant. You know, what you did there was really great. Oh, yeah, oh, thank you. And all that sort of... But we'll be like, oh, you knob as well, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. Everything, everything happens within the 2 hours.
There is definitely a sense in which people express themselves through playing the song. The music the four of us make together is, you know, the fact that we all like it and we're all interested in it, and that's what's kept the band together over the years. And so that kind of transcends whether somebody individually is in a bad mood, you know. But that's that all gets put to one side in general when you go on stage.
I think, you know, all of us become Blur when we're on stage. We leave ourselves at the side of the stage and return back into ourselves when we leave the stage. While we're on stage, we are Blur. We are Blur.
We've known each other since we were 19. There is something tantamount to magic, actually. The whole world falls away, and there's nothing except the music. It's completely exhilarating.
Pretty calm, really, these days. I think after Glastonbury in 2009, I lost all my sort of anxiety about playing really big gigs. And then it's just really, do I do enough to get as big a communal experience as I can sort of muster on that occasion? And I think we all feel like that, you know? It's not about us, it's Blur is as much its audience as the band. I mean, it wouldn't be the same without the audience.
Making music with the four of us, whether it's in the studio or on stage, feels special. It's why we're all still in a band together, I think.
Because we spent so many years just completely ragging it, playing our hearts out, and like, every ounce of us is poured into what we're doing. Every single troy gram of our being is being expressed through the sound that's coming out.
Starts to gather through the set, and then you get to a point where it's just like you can't believe how powerful the communal experience has become. It always makes me feel a bit sort of emotional, because it is, you know, it's this big bubble that you just sort of roll onto stage, and you know, it's like a dream.
great. I come off stage feeling, I know why I love being in this band. I know why I love these guys. Very proud and honoured to be in this position.
I don't know whether I get used to it or whether I'm just old enough to not really get het up about it all. You know, I'm nowhere near as sort of nervous as I used to be about things like that. Because you can't really do much about what's going to happen. So you just have to just try and see that as a fun thing rather than something that's might be a disaster. And I think when a set is quite new, you're still finding your route through it, you know. And eventually, you can kind of go into autopilot with all the playing and stuff like that. But the but you can sort of relax after a while, and that's when some sort of quite good things happen, when you can surprise each other. What happened is what I wanted to happen, and what I was, in my little dreams, wanted to happen. And that's that another Blur album happened, and it worked out great. Us four made some really good music together and made some really good shows, and that's what it was about. And I suppose I was instrumental in making it happen, and that's cool. That's what it was about for me.
Nobody has to be in Blur anymore. We've all got other lives. So it's something we all choose to do, and that definitely makes it special. The spark was evident for me the very first time the four of us got together, you know.
That spark, I wonder where they'll ever figure out what that is, because to get four people getting together like that and all hitting it off straight away, it's just luck, just lucky.
It's that kind of indefinable chemistry thing that human relationships in general are based on, isn't it? And why do you like your friends?
I don't really.
Things about friendships and the pressure on friendships and this new thing, oh yeah, we're all mates again. You know, it's not like, you know, we're all like Dick Van Dyke, you know, mates. You know, we're still human beings, and we're older and weirder and grumpier, and you know, we don't feel obliged to each other, or we shouldn't do. But we don't have to worry about our friendships either. And if we want to work with each other, we will. And if we don't, we don't.
I always treat every show like it's the last, because you never know when Graham's going to go mental, or I'm going to really annoy Damon, or Dave's just going to explode. Just getting marooned in Hong Kong for 5 days was the thing that needed to happen. But my favourite time of this week was just sitting in the back of the bus driving from Scotland to Wales with Graham, just like sitting there looking out the window, making each other laugh. And yeah, I mean, you know, they're the best friends I'll ever have. Fuckers. There's something really, really special about a gnarly, leery, slightly scary rock band playing really loud.
so nice about it is it's a really good record. And if we hadn't have had that really weird, prolonged process and we had bowed to pressure, etc., we could have made an utter pile of shit. And I'm so glad we didn't.
So it's so precarious, really. It could so easily have not happened. It just happened to be in exactly the right place in the world, in exactly the right frame of mind, with 5 miraculous days.
I think Damon got it really right with so much of the lyrics of how I feel. And I think there's a kind of a genius there, that it's someone that tells you actually what you've been thinking all along and haven't quite realised it.
It's an incredible privilege to sort of play those songs and get that reaction. I certainly don't take it for granted.
My anxiety was that it would sit there and we wouldn't find out whether it was good or not, you know? That was what I couldn't bear. It would be safe to just go, that's that. You know, but because that was so nice to do, the last record, and to tour, you know, maybe that's a temptation for us to try it again.
Part of me goes, oh, how could I live without that in my life? And part of me goes, well, you know, I can't expect that forever. And that makes me sad, because forever seems a lot better option than not forever.
What happens next? You know, I've never known the answer to that question.
It's a complete, shiny chapter. Whether it's the last one or not, I have no idea.
The relationship we have between the 4 of us is the most important thing, and if preserving that relationship means there's no more Blur, then there's no more Blur.
I enjoy anything as long as it's still an adventure, and there's still a lot of adventure within Blur.